Justin Trudeau is a fighter. Fighters get knocked out.
Duping tried to call himself Rocky Balboa and play fight songs to aggrandize himself as the star. But the people lined up at food banks, 2 million of them every month, know better.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change.
Will there always be a Canada? There will always be a Canada. All right, elbows up. Elbows up.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
Broken, Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay? Canada's broken because we're stupid.
A real change.
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
And as the most European of the non-European countries, Canada looks first to the European Union. I'm going to give you false precision around this.
What potential conflicts of interest
What
you sought
possible
to avoid?
conflict would you have, Stephanie? I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance.
Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man.
What? Thank you, Mr. President. I'm on the edge of my seat, actually. But thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker. Happy birthday! A few days short. A little bit. A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day.
WTF.
Here, here.
Lately, I've only heard people say it sarcastically, but when it exploded into the zeitgeist earlier this year, it was supposed to capture Canadian grit, standing up to the big bad American bully. It was a vibe, a cultural moment that may have even carried Mark Carney to victory in the 2025 Canadian federal election. But was it a bad metaphor this whole time? Here to explain, your friend and mine, a political commentator and YouTuber based here in Vancouver. He is JJ McCullough, 1 million subscribers on YouTube officially. So happy to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's awesome.
You've been popping off on Twitter quite a bit, criticizing this idea of elbows up. I want to hear your argument. Why is elbows up such a bad slogan or metaphor?
Well, I think the key part of what makes it so bad is that no one seems to really know what that refers to. Like, a strong metaphor is familiar, and like the analogy to what it's sort of, referring to is immediately sort of self-evident. And I understand it's some sort of hockey thing, but what I've repeatedly heard, even from like hardcore hockey fans, is that they don't even really get it. Right?
I thought it's like when a player is charging at you, you stick your elbow up. I've heard, even you were doing like this gesture. I've seen people do like this, or like, like all sorts of other things. People think it's like the Rosie the Riveter kind of thing. It's just like, it's not clear. Like, it's not self-evident what that's supposed to mean. Okay. So it's sort of just become like a thing unto itself. Like, it's just like a reference to mean, like you sort of said, like hurting America, like just hurting Americans, sort of showing that we're tough and resistant and we're going to like take the fight to them directly. So why is that a bad metaphor?
Well, I think it's a bad metaphor. I mean, I think it's a bad metaphor because it's not self-evident what it's supposed to mean. Sure. But I think it's also just a bad bit of rhetoric, because I think that what we've seen is that the idea of taking the fight to the Americans has not proven to be a very strategically sort of useful technique. We've seen, he brought Carney and before him Trudeau, kind of bring up this sort of adversarial approach in the context of the tariffs, right? It's like, if we go after the Americans with an elbows up, with a tough sort of way, then presumably that will sort of soften the Americans. They'll realize that they're tough and we'll get a good deal, blah, 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 blah. Right. But we've seen the Europeans and the British and other countries too do the exact opposite approach, in which they haven't been confrontational. They've just kind of like let it slide. And Trump seems much more willing to negotiate with them. We saw this recently with the US ambassador, right? He was making a lot of headlines, and, he was sort of saying that this elbows up stuff, it seems so mean, it seems so nasty. And it's like, it's fair enough. It's fine to say that's disingenuous given what Trump has said. Yeah. But, at the same time, we do need to, I think, revisit this as a sort of strategic course of action and actually sort of consider if it's actually yielded the promised outcomes.
But didn't this slogan allow us to all rally around the idea of lowering interprovincial trade barriers and being more nationalistic and proud of being Canadian?
But I mean, like, as if that was ever a problem, right? Like, Canadians, I mean, like, it's the easiest thing in the world to get Canadians into some sort of anti-American frenzy and fury. Yeah. And that's why I always resented, the press loved this kind of narrative where it's like, oh, the rediscovery of Canadian patriotism and all this. It's like, as if that had ever not been a thing. Like, as if Canadians had ever been anything other than anti-American. We've been anti-American in every possible different context. We were anti-American after 9/11. We were anti-American during COVID. You know, anti-American, it's just like the consistent sort of theme of Canadian life, right? So I don't think that Carney gets any particular credit for sort of evoking this trope, except to the extent that you said it was useful for him in the context of the federal election. But now that the election is over, you know, he has to kind of back down from that because he's seen it hasn't worked. But now, as you said as well, like now it's sort of being used sarcastically. So it's kind of like this hole that he's dug himself in, where he has to maintain this constant elbows up posture, this constant anti-American adversarial posture, even if it hasn't worked, just because there's all of this demand for it into a public that he's whipped into this frenzy.
So what should it be instead? Should it be like hands out, because we want a cooperative relationship with the U.S. or anyone else if we're trying to diversify trade?
I mean, I think that at this point it should just be like, let's get a deal, right?
Let's get a deal.
Let's make a deal, like the beloved game show, right? No, because I think that's basically where it is politically now. It's like, okay, you know, we haven't like bullied the Americans into sort of coming to the table. In fact, we've done the opposite. We've made them sort of more resistant and more kind of apprehensive about Canada being a good faith partner. So I think instead we do have to sort of adopt some sort of rhetoric where it's very clear what our end game is. And I think that's the problem with the elbows up thing as well, is that it sort of positioned anti-Americanism, hostility to the US as kind of an end unto itself. But that's not, in theory, what it was ever supposed to be. It was supposed to be a technique to get to a deal.
Yeah.
And so we may as well just simplify it and just say, we want a deal, let's make a deal, let's get to the bargaining table. As simple as that.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Now I have a question. Who's ready?
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
Wow.
I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are? Oh.
Irish citizen, yeah.
These are Muslim values.
A real change.
These are Canadian values.
Wow.
Speaking as a European, I love.
Happy birthday! A few days short. A little bit. A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day.
Reticent to
because
talk
I'm
about
because I'm a good negotiator. I have negotiated a number of situations in the past. I know how to manage crises.
This is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes.
A real change.
These are Canadian values. Because President Trump has ignited a trade war that is ruptured. No, we don't like Trump here.
All right, elbows out. Elbows up.
Happy birthday.
Being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you
What
sought
possible
to avoid.
conflict would you have? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final. Look inside yourself, Rosemary.